The signal came in at 3:37 GMT. Static at first, then pulses. Rhythmic. Calculated. It wasn't a pattern Earth had ever heard before, but it was undeniably intentional. Scientists in Geneva lost their minds trying to decode it, while global leaders scrambled behind closed doors, hiding panic behind polished words. On the outskirts of Chicago, in a crumbling apartment with peeling wallpaper and no hot water, David Ross stared at the screen like a man watching his own execution. The news was everywhere. An alien signal intercepted from the Kuiper Belt, strong and clear, amplified by satellites that hadn't buzzed since the Cold War. David wasn't a scientist, nor a soldier, just a factory foreman with a temper and a loaded past. But something about that transmission made his knuckles crack involuntarily. Not fear, not awe, rage, deep and guttural, like a long-forgotten instinct kicking back to life. He wasn't alone. From oil rigs in the Arctic to bunkers in Siberia, from prison cells to police offices, men everywhere felt the same thing. Not wonder, not curiosity, something older. A pulse, a challenge. Every heartbeat synchronized with the signal like a war drum. Governments tried to keep calm. Presidents made speeches, urging people not to jump to conclusions, that it might be benign, exploratory, scientific. But no one bought it. Not this time. Not after the translation. It took 29 hours to crack the core message, and when it was broadcast, leaked by a pissed-off technician from the Indian Space Command, it didn't just go viral. It broke the world. You are not alone. You were not meant to rise. Prepare for correction. That was all. No coordinates, no names, just that. Correction. That word burned through the airwaves. It wasn't just threatening, it was arrogant, cold, dismissive. David smashed his television. Across the globe, fists clenched, jaws tightened. Some wept, others prayed, but most wanted blood. The signal awoke something brutal in humanity, something buried beneath centuries of civilization. A reminder that Earth had climbed from the mud by fighting everything that tried to crush it. The cold, the dark, the beasts, each other. And now, some alien voice dared to say it was a mistake? Number hell no. David left his apartment with nothing but a coat, a cigarette, and the keys to a truck he hadn't driven in 5 years. The world was changing fast, and he felt it in his bones. Something was coming, and the only way humanity would survive was by embracing the thing it had tried so hard to forget. Its fury. David drove with no destination, just instinct. The roads were half empty but not quiet. Military trucks rumbled by, their lights off, their cabins full of young men with shaved heads and tight jaws. The signal hadn't just changed the news cycle, it had tilted the planet off its emotional axis. Gas stations had lines that stretched for miles. Guns were selling out of pawn shops and superstores in hours. There wasn't panic. Not the kind that screams and runs. This was different. Controlled. Grim. Like people already knew what was coming, and they were preparing in silence. By the time David reached Missouri, he hadn't spoken to a single soul, but he'd passed 3 roadblocks, 5 state patrols, and at least 1 convoy that wasn't marked with any known flag. They didn't stop him. They were too focused on their own destination. At a rundown truck stop off Interstate 70, David finally took a break. The place was almost deserted, just an old couple huddled in the corner, whispering over coffee, and a kid behind the counter with haunted eyes. The television was on, but muted. The same footage played over and over. Grainy images of satellites realigning, telescopes pivoting, voices yelling over radio static. Then came the interviews. Men who had served in wars, women who had lost family in unexplained disappearances near deep space relays, a former NASA tech sobbing into a camera about how this wasn't the first signal, just the first one that made it past the sensors. David didn't need interviews. His gut told him everything. They'd been watching, waiting, maybe nudging. This wasn't a hello, it was a reminder, a leash being yanked. But something was wrong with that plan. Humans weren't dogs. He sat at the counter, ordered coffee that tasted like burnt wood, and tried to piece together what to do next. The signal hadn't given a time or a threat. Just prepare for correction. Correction of what? Evolution? Independence? Existence? The door chimed behind him. A tall, square-jawed man in a tattered marine jacket stepped in. His right hand was missing, replaced by a prosthetic that looked homemade. He didn't look around, just walked up beside David, sat down, and nodded once. "You headed to Salt Flat?" he asked. David shook his head. "Wasn't headed anywhere." "You are now?" David raised an eyebrow. "And you are?" "Name's Cole, 1st Battalion, Fort Bragg, or what's left of it." He extended his left hand. David shook it. It was hard, calloused, honest. Cole didn't smile. "We've been waiting for this." David frowned. "We?" Cole leaned in. "Men who weren't blind, who saw the writing on the stars a long time ago. You think this is about governments? Nah. They'll talk themselves in circles until the sky falls on their heads." He reached into his coat and pulled out a battered flash drive. "This is from a deep scan array in South Dakota. They didn't just send a message, they sent coordinates. Only a few caught it before the systems were scrubbed." David stared at it. "And you're telling me why?" Cole grinned, finally. It wasn't friendly. It was surgical. "Because you felt it too, didn't you? The moment that signal hit. Like something inside you snapped awake. A fire. That's not normal. That's instinct. They woke the wrong species, brother." David didn't answer. He didn't have to. The pulse in his veins had never stopped since the transmission, like his blood had been waiting for an excuse to boil. "What's in Salt Flat?" David asked. "People like us. And answers, maybe weapons, maybe something worse. But if we wait for orders from the top, we'll be dead before they finish their first press conference." David looked out the window. The sky was unusually clear. No stars, just a clean sheet of black, a canvas, a warning. He nodded once. "I'll drive." 300 miles west, deep under a mountain disguised as a decommissioned mine, someone else was listening to the signal. Dr. Adrian Hawk had been one of the minds behind the original SETI protocols, long before the public ever knew what they were. He was the man governments called when they needed answers about the cosmos, but didn't want the public to panic. He hadn't slept in 3 days. The signal played on loop in the bunker, dissected into frequencies, wavelengths, subharmonics. Adrian wasn't listening for meaning anymore. He was listening for emotion. And he heard contempt. They weren't curious. They weren't cautious. They were confident. Like a landlord knocking on the door of a tenant who'd stayed too long. "They're not coming to negotiate," Adrian muttered. His assistant, a woman half his age and twice as sharp, looked up from her monitor. "What do you mean?" Adrian turned slowly. His eyes were red-rimmed, his voice low and bitter. "This isn't the first time they've sent that message, just the first time Earth was capable enough to hear it clearly." I mean, he interrupted, "this message isn't directed to us. It's directed at something we've become. They didn't expect us to reach orbit, let alone Mars. And now we've done both. Built ships, created AI, fired nukes into space like confetti. And they don't like it." His assistant was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "So what happens now?" Adrian stood slowly, his back cracked. He looked at the ceiling like he expected it to shatter. "Now," he said, Now the universe remembers that we weren't born in peace. We crawled out of blood and bone and screamed our way into the stars. By the time David and Cole reached Salt Flat, the air was thick with smoke and tension. The facility wasn't a base. It was a compound, built like a fortress and humming with the kind of power that didn't come from generators. Dozens of others had arrived. Some were ex-military, others were scientists, engineers, even hackers. Every one of them carried something raw in their eyes. They'd all heard it, felt it, that awakening. A woman with a scar running down her cheek greeted them. Name? David Ross. She checked a list. You weren't invited. Cole stepped up. He's the reason I made it. He stays. She paused, then nodded. They entered a room filled with ancient tech, gear that hadn't seen light since Reagan was president, patched together with 3D-printed mods and alien-like interfaces. At the center was a device glowing with a deep blue hue, not human-made. What is that? David asked. The woman stepped forward. That's why we're here. It responded to the signal. You mean, it's alien? No, she said. Worse, it's ours. But it only turned on after the message came through, like a key, like they left it behind on purpose, knowing one day we'd be smart enough to use it, right before they came to destroy us. David stared at the machine. It pulsed, not just visually, but in his chest. What does it do? She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. We think it remembers. The machine didn't hum. It throbbed, like a heartbeat that had no source, no organ, no body, yet somehow pulsed through the air with steady, haunting rhythm. David couldn't take his eyes off it. It was the size of a man, made of matte black plates and subtle veins of glowing cobalt. But it wasn't mechanical. It wasn't even alien in the way people imagined. No antennas, no blinking lights, no blinking at all. It simply was, and it waited. Cole stood beside David with arms crossed, squinting. You ever seen tech like that? David shook his head slowly. I've welded titanium frames. I've built engines. This thing, it feels like it's watching me. The woman who had led them in, no name, just the scar and authority, stepped forward. It's not watching. It's recognizing. The words hit harder than they should. Cole's brows furrowed. Recognizing what? She motioned them closer, and against every survival instinct he had, David moved toward it. When he was close enough to reach out, the machine changed. Not visually, but inside, like it woke up just for him. It's been here since the Cold War, she said, buried in a rock slide in New Mexico. NORAD found it during a missile site survey in '83. They kept it hidden for 40 years. No one could figure out what it was. No moving parts, no interfaces, just metal and light. Cole's voice was hard. And now? She looked at him like a soldier giving a eulogy. Now it responds. To him. David turned, startled. Me? She nodded once. It flared the moment you walked through the perimeter. The pulse in your body matches its frequency. Cole grunted. You're telling me he's some kind of chosen one? Not chosen, she corrected. Compatible. David stepped back. What does that even mean? It means you're not the only one, she replied, but you're the strongest signal we've seen so far. They called it the Relic. Not a name of awe, but one of fear. Theories had circled for decades. Some thought it was an alien gift, others a Trojan horse. But now, in the face of a galactic threat, it was the only thing that responded. They led David into a briefing room. Cracked screens, maps with red string, and paper files. Paper, as if they didn't trust digital anymore. Everyone sat in grim silence while an old man in a wheelchair rolled to the front. He wore a lab coat stained with years, and his right eye had been replaced by a metal disc with a blinking dot. "I'm Dr. Lorne. Welcome to the last sane place on Earth." No one laughed. He pointed to a satellite image on the screen behind him, a shot of deep space. The signal wasn't just a message. It was a ping, a flare, something they used to scan us, to measure how far we've come since they last visited. Cole muttered, "You're saying we've had contact before?" Lorne nodded. "Not contact. Culling." The room went dead quiet. He tapped his bionic eye. 60 years ago we found remnants, cities under the Antarctic ice, burned, collapsed, but too advanced to be ours. We thought they were ruins of some forgotten civilization. We were wrong. They were leftovers from the last correction. David's hands curled into fists. Lorne continued. "Every time a species on this planet reached a certain level of development, the same thing happened. Meteor strikes, floods, extinctions. It was never natural. It was regulation." He turned to face them. "We were never supposed to get this far." David felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "So the aliens, what, they're cosmic landlords?" "They're something worse," Lorne said. "They're cleaners. They don't conquer. They reset, coldly, efficiently. But something happened this time. They didn't strike first. They sent a warning." David's voice was low, dangerous. "Why warn us at all?" Lorne looked at the floor. "Because we're close, maybe too close, and that terrifies them." The relic wasn't just a machine. It was a memory bank. Not in words or images, but in feelings, sensations, instincts. And it responded to certain people, like a dog recognizing its bloodline. David sat before it, drenched in sweat, palms on its surface, no buttons, no wires, just contact. And suddenly, he was somewhere else. A battlefield, not on Earth. Red skies, black sand. Giant beings like armored insects clashed with screaming human-like soldiers. Lasers carved the ground. Metal shattered bone. But the humans, they were winning. David gasped, jerking back. The relic's light dimmed. Lorne was watching. "You saw it," he whispered. "Didn't you?" David nodded slowly. "We fought them before." Lorne's eyes glittered. "Yes, not our civilization, but our kind. Homo ferox, a branch of humanity that didn't survive, but it fought so hard they buried this machine in a mountain so their rage wouldn't die." Cole stepped forward. "And now it's passing the torch?" "Not a torch," Lorne said grimly. "A curse." The next day David began training. Not with guns, not with tactics, with his mind. The relic didn't require physical strength. It required emotional intensity. It drew power from memory, from trauma, from rage. Every man chosen for contact had to relive their worst moments to fuel it. David screamed as the machine pulled images from him. His brother dying in a senseless mugging. His daughter's miscarriage. The night his wife left without a word. He bled memory until he felt hollow. But the relic pulsed brighter. Others failed. One shot himself in the mess hall after a session. Another fell into a coma. But David, he endured. By the end of the week, the machine moved. It unfolded like a blooming flower, revealing a core of spinning, iridescent material that hummed with impossible power. Lorne wept when he saw it. "It's choosing him." Cole clenched his fists. "Then let's stop training and start preparing." They weren't alone. Satellites picked up movement near Jupiter. Ships, thousands of them. The fleet had begun its descent. They didn't hide. They didn't fear retaliation. They came like a thunderstorm, inevitable. But something had changed on Earth. The signal hadn't just awakened the relic. It had awakened us. Across the world, unexplainable tech began to activate. Devices once dismissed as junk began to hum. Forgotten ruins flared with energy. The relics of our past selves, The warriors, the builders, the defiant, started whispering back. China unearthed a mountain that wasn't a mountain at all. Russia's old vaults in Siberia began to thaw with radiation, not from nuclear waste, but from stored alien cores. The world's leaders couldn't contain it. The fury had spread. David stood before a hangar the size of a stadium. Inside was a war machine, born from the relic's memory. A ship shaped like a dagger, with no fuel, no wings, and no controls. It responds to intent, Lorne explained. It moves where you direct your anger. It fires where you aim your hate. David touched it. It hummed. And the world watched as, for the first time in history, a human ship born of rage, not science, lifted from the earth without a single engine firing. Cole stood at the base, rifle in hand, smiling. "They're gonna regret waking us up." The ship had no name, not officially, but those who saw it lift from the earth for the first time called it Wrathborn. It was sleek, obsidian black, and utterly silent. Not a flame touched the sky as it rose, just an eerie hum that trembled in the bones of every man who watched. It moved not by force, but by something deeper. A psychic will wrapped in the fury of mankind's pain. David sat alone in the cockpit, if it could even be called that. There were no controls, no buttons, no joysticks, just the relic embedded in a cradle of energy at the ship's core, glowing and pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. It connected directly to his mind, feeding off his memories, his emotions, his anger. Outside, command stations scrambled to track it. Their radars showed nothing. Their satellites failed to lock on. It moved beyond what they understood. Even Lorne, watching from the salt-flat compound, looked more like a prophet than a scientist. "It's happening," he whispered to himself. Humanity's first true weapon. In orbit, the alien fleet approached steadily. Thousands of vessels in perfect formation, moving with the elegance of machines bred for one purpose, to erase what did not conform. No communications, no messages, just a slow descent, like a cosmic execution squad coming to fulfill its duty. And still, Earth did not plead. It prepared. Governments began to fracture under pressure. Some wanted to negotiate, others wanted to surrender. A few, desperate and deluded, tried to flee off-world in half-baked rockets meant for Mars colonization. But the men and women who mattered, those who felt the signal's fury like David, they stayed. Cole stood at a training yard carved into the desert floor, watching squads of fighters learn to sink their minds with ancient weapons. Rifles that didn't use bullets but thought. Shields that flared only when fear was mastered. Armor that hardened with each burst of conviction. "These aren't soldiers," one grizzled sergeant muttered. "They're zealots." Cole grinned. "Good. Zealots don't quit when the odds turn." Across the base, more relics activated. Not all responded to rage, some to loyalty, others to sacrifice. But they all demanded something primal, something Earth had tried to forget in its age of comfort. And the people remembered. In the sky above, Wrathborn broke the edge of Earth's atmosphere without resistance. David sat motionless, breathing slow and heavy. The machine fed off his memory. And so he gave it everything. He remembered the night he held his wife's letter, unsigned, final. He remembered his brother's blood on cold pavement. He remembered punching walls until his bones cracked. He remembered every moment he'd wanted the world to burn, just so it could feel what he felt. And the ship responded. Its surface shimmered. Runes, alien and yet familiar, burned into the hull. It didn't just carry David's fury. It became it. As the alien fleet came into visual range, Wrathborn's systems flared. Not with heat, but with intention. Targeting protocols appeared in David's vision, Not digital overlays, but something internal. He didn't need to understand how. The ship understood him. He saw their formations, disc-shaped crafts with weapon pods the size of battleships. They moved like predators, each scanning, measuring. David didn't hesitate. With a thought, Wrathborn surged forward. The first strike was like nothing Earth had ever seen. A pulse, not of plasma or missile, but rage, directed like a spear, pierced through the lead alien vessel. It didn't explode. It folded, crushed inward as if space itself rejected its presence. The remaining fleet reacted instantly. Hundreds of weapons aimed, launched, streaked toward Wrathborn. David gritted his teeth. He thought of every injustice, every betrayal, every night he cursed the sky for its silence. Wrathborn blinked, disappearing from their targeting matrix and reappearing behind the formation. It didn't dodge. It teleported through hatred. Another ship fell, then two more. David felt no joy, no thrill, only a cold, focused resolve. These weren't living things. They were executioners, and he was the resistance. Back on Earth, the world watched in awe. Every major network was hacked, not by humans, but by Wrathborn itself. The ship wanted them to see, not the fear, the defiance. Children pointed at the screen and cheered. Old warriors wept, and the cowards who had plotted to bow down in secret, they began to sweat. The President of the United States, forced to address the world, stood pale and trembling. We are not alone, and we are not helpless. It was the best he could do, because by then, humanity had stopped waiting for leadership. Lorne stood in the control center, his face bathed in blue light from the relic network. "They're scanning for him," he murmured. "The fleet. They know what he is." Cole lit a cigarette beside him. "Let him look. They'll find more of him soon." Lorne turned. "We can't rely on one man, even with the relic." "We're not," Cole said. "You forget. Rage spreads, and it's contagious." Lorne frowned, then walked toward the database terminal. "We've found 3 more compatible. Lesser signals, but still strong." Cole exhaled smoke. "Build them ships." "We don't have time." Cole stared at him, hard. "Make it." In orbit, Wrathborn faced the counterattack. Alien ships began to converge, forming a web of energy nets and gravity wells meant to crush anomalies. David didn't blink. He pushed forward, through fire and distortion and agony. The ship took hits, but only when he lost focus. It needed him fully immersed in his pain. When he drifted, it weakened. When he embraced the fire, it became unstoppable. He wasn't just flying a weapon, he was becoming a war. Suddenly, a new message entered his mind. Not from Earth, not from the aliens, from the relic itself, a memory not his own. He saw another man, centuries ago, standing on a scorched alien battlefield, holding a similar weapon, fighting alone against legions, losing, bleeding, but still screaming at the stars, and the voice. "They fear not your weapons. They fear your rage. They fear what you become when cornered, when broken, when betrayed." David opened his eyes. The alien fleet loomed ahead. Hundreds remained. Thousands, maybe. He smiled. "Then let's give them a reason to fear." The second assault was not surgical. It was vengeful. David drove Wrathborn into the heart of the enemy, breaking their formation with reckless fury. Every strike he delivered came with the force of 1 billion human regrets. Every dodge, a testament to our refusal to die quietly. For every ship that fell, a new memory surged in him, not just his own, but from the relic. Memories of mankind's ancient wars, of blood spilled on forgotten moons, of battles lost and won not with strategy, but with will. The alien armada began to falter. They moved less smoothly, less confidently. They were adapting, not their weapons, but their mentality. Fear had entered them, and that made them vulnerable. David saw a cluster forming, a mothership, bigger than all the rest, probably the command center. He focused. Wrathborn obeyed. He drove the ship into a dive, hurtling past defensive grids and minefields of plasma. The closer he got, the more resistance he felt. Not physical, mental. Like something in the core of that ship tried to override his thoughts. A presence, alien, ancient, and arrogant. "You are defiance, but you are dust. Burn, ape." David's head rang, his vision blurred, the ship dimmed. But then he remembered her. His daughter. The crib. The silence. The hospital's sterile smell. And rage returned. The ship screamed. The hull blazed. And with a final surge, he slammed a psychic spear straight into the mothership's core. A light exploded across orbit, visible from Earth. Not a fireball. Not destruction. Release. Wrathborn tumbled back, wounded but alive. And in the void where the mothership had hovered, nothing remained. On Earth, sirens stopped. The sky calmed. Lorne's voice broke as he whispered into the mic. "He did it." Cole nodded once. That was the first blow. Lorne looked at him. "You think they'll stop?" Cole shook his head slowly. "Number they'll come in force now. That was their scout, their judge." He looked up at the stars. "But now they know what we are." The smoke hadn't even cleared in orbit before the second wave arrived. They didn't come with the same slow, confident pace as the first. These new ships fell out of hyperspace like blades hurled from the dark, sharp, angular, cold. 10 times more. 100. Enough to blot out stars. The first wave had been a test. This was the punishment. Back on Earth, Wrathborn's return was not celebrated. It was watched in dead silence. As it descended, battle-scarred and scorched, people gathered across deserts, cities, and crumbling rooftops to see it. The ship landed without ceremony. Silent, its black surface cracked like cooled lava, the glow beneath dimmed. David stumbled out. He didn't look victorious. He looked empty. The toll had been worse than physical. Wrathborn fed off memory, off pain, and David had given it everything. For a time, the line between who he was and what the ship made him become blurred. Now he was back. But not whole. Lorne was there to meet him. He looked smaller than before, older. Maybe it was the weight of knowing that victory had only made things worse. "You saved us," he said quietly. David sat down on the ramp, his hands shaking. "For what? Another round?" Lorne crouched beside him. "We hit them. Hard. Hard enough they're not sending more scouts. They're sending executioners." David looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Then we die next." "No," said a new voice. Cole stepped into view, a heavy coat slung over his shoulder, and a rifle that didn't belong to any Earth army in his grip. "No," he repeated. "We fight." Around the globe, Earth began to change. Not politically, not diplomatically, instinctively. The nations that had postured for decades dropped their charades. Armies dissolved into warbands. Commanders became clan leaders. Technology was shared, secrets spilled, and relic energy, that ancient, emotion-fueled tech, was distributed among the chosen. They called them the Bound. Men and women attuned to the signal, some through rage, others through loss, loyalty, love, or vengeance. Each powered a piece of weaponry tied to the old code hidden in Earth's ruins. There was a sword in Indonesia that glowed when near despair, a cannon in Congo that fired only when the user remembered betrayal, a shield in the ruins of Berlin that activated with guilt, and punished those who'd never felt it. And now, more than ever, those who carried pain became Earth's protectors. David was no longer alone. 3 new ships had been constructed. less perfect than Wrathborn, but deadly in their own right, piloted by men who had tasted loss and clawed through madness. The first, Gravemind, was flown by a Russian ex-sniper named Anton, whose family had been erased in a drone error during peacekeeping ops. He hadn't spoken in years, but the ship didn't need speech. It thrived on silence filled with grief. The second, Howler, was helmed by a woman from Colombia named Vega, whose entire rebel unit had been buried alive by a collapsing mountain, a natural disaster linked to alien manipulation, she claimed. Her rage lit the sky in red. The third, Nemesis, was operated by twins, Jude and Callan, orphans of war who shared a pain so deeply synchronized that the ship split into two units that fought as one. Their bond was their weapon. Together, with Wrathborn leading, they became the First Wing, the tip of Earth's vengeance. Then the sky cracked. The Second Fleet didn't communicate, it broadcasted presence. A single signal was beamed planet-wide, this time not just in frequency, but in visuals. Across every screen, every device, even directly into the minds of the bound, an image appeared. A planet, gray and dead, cities erased, oceans dried. "Correction complete," the message said in thousands of languages at once. Then a pause. "Earth is non-compliant. Correction begins." It was not negotiation. It was procedure. The assault began with atmospheric saturation. Massive dreadnoughts floated above continents and rained down spikes that embedded in cities. They didn't explode. They broadcast. Frequencies that interfered with human cognition. Waves that induced panic. Hopelessness. Tens of thousands took their own lives in the first hour. Hospitals overflowed. Governments tried to declare martial law but couldn't communicate. The signal turned every broadcast into a whisper of despair, until Cole hacked in. He appeared on every screen, unshaven, grim, staring straight into the feed with eyes that dared the galaxy to keep watching. "This is Earth," he growled. "You want to correct us? Come down here and bleed for it." And somehow, the signal weakened. Not globally, just enough. Enough for the First Wing to launch. The battle wasn't strategic. It wasn't even fair. The alien dreadnoughts were superior in every metric: firepower, numbers, speed. But they lacked one thing: conviction. The First Wing cut through them like burning arrows. Wrathborn led with pinpoint strikes, bypassing shields by threading through dimensional cracks like a predator stalking prey. Gravemind silently disintegrated weapon pods before they fired. Howler screamed past enemy lines, leaving trails of magnetic death. Nemesis operated like wolves, flanking, twisting, breaking ranks. Every time a bound struck, the alien command flinched, because their psychology, their planning, had no answer for emotion as weapon. But they fought back. In orbit, a command ship pulsed with psychic force. It projected an anti-signal that directly attacked Wrathborn's core, aimed at David's mind. He felt it instantly, a cold presence, dragging old pain back up. His brother's screams, his daughter's stillborn breath, the moment he realized he was alone. He buckled. Wrathborn flickered. Another blow, and he saw her, his wife, not as she was, but as he feared, smiling at someone else, forgetting him, replacing him. He screamed. The ship shuddered. Below, Earth's surface burned, then a voice cut through. Cole, through the comms, snarling like a devil. "David, you gave up everything. You survived. Don't let them rewrite what made you." And that was the key. The pain wasn't a weakness. It was his weapon. David roared and reconnected. Wrathborn flared like a dying sun, then streaked upward, bypassed the command ship's shield, and released a burst of emotion so intense that alien vessels buckled under psychic pressure alone. It wasn't just fire. It was grief unleashed as force. The command ship imploded. Earth's signal flared again. This time, not a distress call, a war cry. Across the planet, humans began to rise from their stupor. The signal was weakening. The psychic net breaking. Cities fought back. People returned to their pain and wielded it like armor. Earth was burning, but it was still standing. And the aliens, for the first time in millennia, had to ask themselves, what if this species cannot be corrected? The air on Earth no longer smelled like soil and sky. It reeked of ozone, charred steel, and old blood. The sky, once blue, was painted in ash and crimson as burning husks of alien dreadnoughts collapsed into the atmosphere, leaving behind clouds that never quite cleared. But Earth was still here, uncorrected. At the Salt Flat compound, Lorne stood before a map that wasn't on any screen. It was etched into the concrete floor, hand-drawn with charcoal and blood, updated hourly. Red circles marked cities that had fallen. Blue ones marked those still standing. And green stars, rare and glowing, marked places where relic energy had been successfully activated. "We've reached critical mass," he said, more to himself than to the others. Cole stood nearby, strapping on an exoframe infused with relic conduits. The machine hissed and groaned as it adjusted to his body, like armor awakening from a long nap. "Critical mass for what?" he asked, eyes narrowing. Lorne looked up. "For offense." Cole raised an eyebrow. "We've spent weeks surviving," Lorne explained, "but the relic signals are strengthening. The Bound aren't just holding the line, they're learning. The ships are becoming extensions. The tech is fusing with biology." He stepped toward a separate chamber, cold, reinforced, humming with a frequency that made teeth ache. Inside was a sphere, pulsing in irregular, agitated rhythms. "They're afraid," Lorne said. Cole looked in. "That thing one of theirs?" "No," Lorne replied. "It's ours. But it's talking to them, and they don't like what it's saying." "What is it saying?" Lorne paused. "We remember." Rathborn hovered above the smoldering remains of the Pacific, scanning debris and wreckage for signals. David was no longer fragile, no longer drowning in the weight of his memories. He had learned how to weaponize them, not by resisting, but by embracing the pain fully. Pain sharpened him. Each wound was a blueprint, each failure a map. He was beyond angry now. He was intent. "David," Vega's voice crackled through the comms. "We've got a signal. Deep orbit, a gathering point." "How deep?" he asked, eyes closed, seeing more with his thoughts than his eyes. "Jupiter's shadow, behind the ice moons." Anton's deep, gravelly voice followed. "Big signature? Might be a shipyard." "Or a gate," Callan said. "Or both," Jude added. David opened his eyes. "Then we take it." Earth's last hope wasn't to repel the aliens. It was to interrupt the system. The cycle of correction, the pattern of cosmic sterilization. According to ancient relics and fragments decoded from alien black boxes, every correction followed a protocol, a rhythm, a countdown. Find the species. Mark the growth. Burn the evidence. Leave a seed to monitor and repeat. And now they had found Earth's seed. The problem was, the seed had grown teeth. Operation Razor Star was born in less than 24 hours. The plan was suicide. The first wing would launch from Earth and fly into the blind zone near Jupiter's icy moons, using relic shielding to mask their presence. There, they would locate the shipyard, or gate, and destroy it before the next fleet emerged. No reinforcements, no backup. Just 5 relic-bonded warships and a payload of pure fury. As Rathborn lifted from Earth for the second time, the people below didn't cheer. They saluted. They stood in silence and raised clenched fists. It was no longer about saving the planet. It was about ending the game. The silence in Jupiter's shadow was unnatural. Even in space, there was always something. Radiation hums, background particles, pulses of dying stars. But here, nothing. It was a silence that waited. Vega's ship, Howler, led the approach. Her systems pulsed erratically as she neared the target zone. "My gut's tight," she muttered. "Something's off." Anton's grave mind stayed back, cloaked in grief like a ghost. "I feel them. Not the ships." The minds Jude and Callan's nemesis began scanning. "We see a structure. No movement. Looks dormant." "Dormant," David said coldly. "Isn't the same as dead." Rathborn pushed forward. Then they saw it. A lattice of ships. Thousands. Suspended like bones around a black core. A gate made not of metal, but some fluid geometry that bent space. It wasn't just a launch point. It was a manufacturing system, a crucible for war machines. And it was waking up. Back on Earth, Lorne stared at the sphere in the vault. The pulses had changed. Faster. Angrier. "They're signaling something," his assistant whispered. Lorne didn't reply. He already knew. In orbit of Jupiter, the gate flared, and the message came again. Not a voice, not a command. A feeling. "You do not belong." Rathborn's systems flared in response. David grit his teeth. "Neither did you, once." The first wing surged forward, and the gate responded, unleashing horrors. These weren't ships, these were reapers, limbs of metal and light, formless and pure, each moving with the intelligence of 1,000 minds and the cruelty of none. They moved not to fight, but to erase. The battle exploded like a solar flare. Howler launched into the middle, spinning wildly and leaving trails of disruption that broke formation. Vega screamed inside her cockpit, not in fear, but in memory. Her fallen unit, the dirt in her lungs, the betrayal of being buried and forgotten. The ship responded. Blades of sonic warps slicing through alien constructs. Gravemind hovered in silence, picking apart reapers with pinpoint blasts of compressed sorrow. Anton remembered his wife's laugh, how it was stolen from him in a bureaucratic accident no one answered for. He killed with grief. Nemesis split and reformed constantly, dancing between threats never caught. Jude and Callan synced perfectly, moving as if they were one breath in two bodies. Every move was a memory of loss, and Rathborn. Rathborn became something else. It no longer flew. It drifted with purpose. Every thought David had, the ship acted on before it was finished. It moved like it had a soul. Because now it did. His. They fought for hours, and they began to lose. There were too many. Too fast. Too fluid. The gate itself began to shudder and open, revealing more beyond. Fleets, worlds, forces never meant to be seen. And then Rathborn turned away. "David, what the hell are you doing?" Vega yelled. David's voice was calm. "Ending this." He directed the ship not toward the gate, but into it. Lorne watched the sphere in the bunker go dark. He didn't cry. He simply whispered, "You beautiful bastard." Rathborn entered the gate, and it changed. It wasn't a wormhole. It was a core, a brain, a central nervous system for every correction across the galaxy. A central intelligence that kept the cycle running, calculating which civilizations would be spared and which would be erased. David saw it. A mind, not alive, not dead, just cold. It scanned him. "You are an error," he smiled. "So were you." He pulled every memory forward, every ache, every scream, every lonely night, every forgotten promise. He didn't hide from it. He let it consume him, and Rathborn exploded with all of humanity's rage. The gate tore open, not wider but inward, like a black hole birthed in reverse. Systems collapsed, ships froze, reapers disintegrated, and on Earth every bound felt it. like a tether had snapped. The correction was over, because the signal was dead. The galaxy stood still. The moment Wrathborn collapsed into the core of the gate and ignited the stored fury of an entire species, the great cosmic machine that had kept the cycle of correction running for eons, shattered. There was no light, no explosion, no sound, just a ripple that unwound laws. Gateways in distant corners of the stars blinked and went cold. Dreadnoughts, mid-flight across systems, froze mid-space like their orders had evaporated. Protocols within the ancient alien networks began to loop, fail, and collapse. The machine mind, the one that calculated planetary growth and decided when to erase, was gone. It hadn't died. It had been corrupted, not by code, not by infection, by grief, by fury, by the raw, wild emotions of a creature it had never designed for. Man. On Earth, the storm passed. Lorne stood over the relic sphere, which now lay dull and quiet. The pressure in the bunker lifted. Men who hadn't been able to sleep for weeks finally rested. Women stopped hearing screams and frequencies. The whispers were gone. He looked up at the ceiling like he could see through it. "David," he whispered, "you didn't just destroy their gate. You made them remember fear." But peace wasn't a blanket that fell easily over Earth. The planet was cracked open. Whole cities were gone. Seas had risen. Skies still flickered with radiation storms from the falling husks of alien weapons. And now came the question no one wanted to ask aloud. What now? Cole sat at the edge of the Salt Flat command post, a cracked rifle resting across his knees, a bottle of scorched whiskey in one hand. Beside him sat Vega, dirt on her face, grease under her fingernails, arms wrapped around her knees like she was afraid to uncurl. "I heard Wrathborn's last broadcast," she said after a long silence. Cole nodded. "Me too." "You think he knew what it would do?" "I think he didn't care," Cole said. "He saw a chance. He took it." Vega's voice cracked. "He was the best of us." "No," Cole said, standing slowly. "He was the beginning of us." In the weeks that followed, something else began to stir. The relics didn't go dark. They changed. Their signals, once erratic and bound to emotion, began to hum in harmony. Less violent, less chaotic, cooperative. They weren't weapons anymore. They were blueprints. Anton, Jude, Callan, Vega, they all began to feel it. Not rage, not pain, something else. A pull, a call forward. Like the relics were no longer using them, but inviting them. Earth's skies began to clear, and in the cleaned-up wreckage of a downed alien processor ship, a message emerged. Not a threat, not a warning, a data burst, one single stream of coordinates and one line of untranslated code. It was addressed to Earth. Lorne gathered the remaining bound in a hidden outpost in Iceland, where magnetic fields made relic energy easier to read. He stood at a cracked podium, looking over faces hollowed by war and hardened by loss. "We've broken the cycle," he said, "but something's out there, something that saw what we did and didn't recoil. It reached back." He tapped the console. A hologram appeared. A planet. Green. Blue. No signs of artificial structures. But one thing was clear. It was pulsing, like Wrathborn, like the relics. Whatever sent this, it's not correction, it's older, deeper, something they tried to bury. Cole crossed his arms. "Why send a map now?" Lorne looked at him. "Because David woke up something that wasn't supposed to remember." Vega volunteered first. Her ship, Howler, was the most intact. "I want to know why he had to die for this," she said, "and I want to know who gave us the fire to begin with." Anton followed, silently. Then Jude and Callan, saying nothing but holding their relic cores close like sacred items. Cole turned to leave. Lorne stopped him. "You're not going?" Cole smirked. "I've done my part. Let the wounded carry the flame now." He didn't say it, but his eyes did. "I'm tired. Let the broken build." The new fleet wasn't a military force. It wasn't a revenge squad. It was something humanity hadn't sent into space in generations. Explorers. But this time they weren't reaching out with open hands. They were reaching out with eyes wide open, teeth bared, hearts armored. Howler lifted from Earth with no ceremony. Just quiet hope. The journey to the new world took a week through the rift left behind by Wrathborn's sacrifice. The passage didn't feel like flight. It felt like being judged. The stars flickered wrong. Shapes loomed in the distance that didn't obey physics. Whispers filled the ships, not voices but sensations. Memories that weren't theirs, a battlefield, a city, a funeral, a rebellion. Someone had stood before the correction before. Someone had bled for Earth before it was Earth. Humanity had not evolved into rebellion. It had been born from it. The world was waiting. It had no name. So they called it Echo. Because every step they took on its soil felt like walking into their own past. The relics hummed more powerfully here. No translation needed. No syncing required. The world recognized them. In a canyon shaped like a screaming jaw, they found structures. Not metal, not stone. Bone. Titanic skeletons twisted around black monoliths. Half buried, half revered. At the center, a throne, empty. And around it, carvings, not of gods, not of kings, of humans. Jude touched one. His eyes rolled back. Callan caught him before he fell. He spoke with a voice not his own. "We failed the first time. We burned the second. We waited in the dark. Now, the fire walks again. Remember your blood, and burn forward." Then silence. They called Lorne from orbit. He didn't speak for a long time after seeing the images. Finally, he said, "Wrathborn wasn't the first. Just the first to win. Earth entered a new era, not of peace, not of war, but of reckoning. The relics were everywhere, and now they hummed a different tune. Not vengeance, invitation. What had once been tools for war were now tools for awakening. Children began to see patterns in the stars that adults missed. Elders dreamed in languages no one had spoken for 10,000 years. And deep under the earth, in temples buried beneath ocean beds and glacial cracks, the old fires stirred. The bound weren't alone anymore. Humanity wasn't broken. It was becoming. Cole stood at the edge of a cliff, staring at the sky. The world was healing, but he wasn't. And that was okay. He whispered into the wind. "David, you didn't just fight for us. You freed us." And behind him, in the red glow of sunset, relics whispered back. Not the end. The threshold. The stars above Earth no longer felt distant, not because humanity had mastered them, but because something old now stirred within their light. The galaxy had not just taken notice of Earth's resistance, it had been shaken by it. Where once Earth was just another forgotten dot in a cold expanse, it now pulled attention. Not from conquerors, from witnesses. On Echo, the bound moved deeper into the planet's buried heart. Every footstep sent ripples through relic soil. Every breath synced with a rhythm older than language. It wasn't science that guided them now. It was inheritance. Vega led the expedition into the Valley of Mouths, named for the endless stone faces carved into the cliffs, each one twisted in fury, pain, or defiance. Some bore human features, others something adjacent, close enough to be kin, far enough to haunt. Anton walked silently behind her, relic rifle cradled in his arms. He hadn't spoken since they landed, but no one asked why. His presence was speech enough, a monument to survival. Jude and Callan flanked the rear, their connection as eerie as ever. Sometimes one would finish a thought the other hadn't said. Sometimes they moved before danger even came. Echo amplified their bond. This wasn't exploration anymore. It was resonance. At the planet's core, they found it, a chamber the size of a stadium, perfectly circular, with a single pillar in the middle. No markings, no light, just stone and stillness. Vega stepped forward. "Howler," she whispered. "You feel this?" The ship, now integrated into her relic suit, vibrated softly. The pillar responded to her voice, not with motion but with awareness. Anton fell to one knee without warning. Jude staggered. Callan screamed. Vega clutched her chest. Memories poured in, not theirs. Wars fought before the earth cooled. Voices speaking across oceans of stars, the creation of the correction. They saw it all. Not a race, a rebellion. Earth's ancestors, whoever they were, had risen in defiance once before. So powerful, so uncontrollable, the galaxy didn't destroy them all. It erased the knowledge of them. Echo wasn't just a relic. It was a tomb, a memorial to the first uprising, a warning. And now it recognized its children. Back on Earth, Lorne received the transmission in fragments. The images were distorted, but the message was clear. They erased us before, but we remember now. And memory is fire. He wept, not from grief, from clarity. In the years that followed, Earth changed. The relics became part of life, not tools, but guides. They didn't make life easier. They made it sharper. Children learned history not from books, but from memory vaults. Soldiers trained not in barracks, but in dreamscapes of the past. Emotion became currency. Pain became potential. The bound multiplied. Not because of war, but because of awakening. Each one chosen by what they felt most deeply. The angry, the broken, the loyal, the lost. The flawed became the flames. And then the stars answered. Not with dreadnoughts, not with death, but with emissaries. Beings wrapped in gold and silence, eyes like voids, limbs like whispers. They came not as rulers or judges, but as apologetic ghosts. They kneeled before the bound and spoke. We feared what you are. Now we see what we were. Vega stood on the surface of Echo, surrounded by ancient machines that now pulsed like hearts. She had become more than a pilot, more than a fighter. She was conduit and memory, rage and peace braided together. She addressed the emissaries. We won't be corrected. They nodded. She continued, but we won't be conquerors either. The emissary closest to her, formless yet radiant, replied, Then lead us forward, into the fire. A new alliance was born, not forged in treaties or political pages, but in scars and shared memory. The age of silence was over. The age of fury had passed. Now came the age of echoing flames. Humanity would not forget its pain. It would build with it. On the edge of the solar system, a ship drifted. Wrathborn, intact, quiet. It had not been destroyed, only changed. Inside, David lay in stasis, not dead, not quite alive. The relic had preserved him, not for resurrection, not for worship, for timing, when the stars grew cold again, when correction tried to rise, when humanity's flame flickered. Wrathborn would return, and David would wake. Cole stood on a mountain in Chile, watching the auroras ripple like oceans. His rifle was gone, his exoframe rusted and buried, but his eyes, those fire-colored eyes, still scanned the horizon like a soldier. Behind him, children trained with relic blades, laughing, learning. He smiled faintly. Correction failed, he muttered. Now let's see what we build from the ashes. In the dark between galaxies, in places no light had touched in 1 billion years, whispers began to spread. Not of conquest, of Earth, of a species that could not be erased, of a signal that awakened fury, and of a fire that would never go out.